Welcome to Listening to Lancaster. My name is Jonathan Russell with Hourglass, and I am excited to be here with the Coalition for Smart Growth. I've got Carol Simpson and Josh Druce with us from that board. So thanks so much for being with us today.
Glad to be here.
And before we get started, I want to do a quick shout out to our sponsor of this series, Michael's Motor Cars. They're a new sponsor, and we really appreciate their support for this video interview series. Thank you so much. Why don't we start with just a brief introductions of yourselves and your roles within the Coalition for Smart Growth. Josh, do you want to start?
I'd be happy to. Sure. Thank you, Jonathan.
Of course.
So my name is Joshua Druce. I'm currently serving as the president for the Coalition for Smart Growth. My day job and by trade, I'm a commercial banker, specializing in commercial real estate and even more specialized within construction. And I got involved with, sort of land use decisions. And I was telling this story this morning, actually. I forgot where it originally originated, but I used to commute to Philly via train. And for a while I was taking the SEPTA and I was getting off in Parksburg and the train could not turn around. And so it was going all the way to Lancaster. And it annoyed me because I was going to Lancaster. I just wanted to stay on the train and it was going there. Why couldn't I just get off there? And you start exploring all these different things and you start exploring who pays for what and how decisions like this are made. And eventually I talked to enough people. I learned more. It started the ball rolling. I served for 3 years on the Lancaster City Planning Commission. After serving on the City Planning Commission, I became aware of how many issues affecting Lancaster City are actually county-wide problems or issues, which brought me to volunteering with the Coalition. And here I am a little while later, serving as the president and chatting with you here today.
Thanks, Josh. Carol, you are also a Hourglass board member, so you're doing double duty today.
Glad to do it. I have, my real life, my job was in healthcare, but having lived in Lancaster County, in fact, having lived in Manheim Township almost my whole life, I've always been interested in land use. And as time went on, I became, first I was appointed to the Manheim Township Planning Commission, which resulted in me being involved in some county committees and boards related to land use. And then I was elected Manheim Township Commissioner and I became the Planning and Zoning Commissioner. Kind of concurrently with that, I joined the board of the Lancaster County Conservancy. So I have been both on a conservation board as well as a municipal board. And I know people in Manheim Township often say, oh my gosh, it's all built out. And, we've got construction going on everywhere. But in fact, under my board, when I was president of the Board of Commissioners, we managed to, through a combination of TDRs, zoning, preservation efforts, about 25% of the land in Manheim Township, the most populous suburb of Lancaster County, has now been preserved for farmland. So my hat is very definitely on both sides of growth and development and preservation.
Excellent, great. And that leads me to my next question of what is a Coalition for Smart Growth, and how does the organization operate in Lancaster County? Josh, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, and our primary mission is to to advocate and educate, and maybe occasionally agitate for appropriate and sensible land use policies. And that includes sort of a holistic view of how all of the pieces fit together. One of the challenges with this space is, development affects every aspect of somebody's life. And there are other organizations in the area that, look at conservation or, farmland preservation, or even health and wellness. And I like to think that we're one of the few organizations that's sort of a big umbrella for that, to take the holistic view of how all the pieces fit together.
And so with that kind of overview of what the organization advocates for and educates on, how does it operate? How does it carry out that mission?
Yeah, so we operate a number of different events. Sometimes they're geared towards the early stage of education of these are the issues, and sometimes our target is people that may have never considered how the layout to their community has been operated before. We'd previously taken lessons into high school classrooms to start people very early on in their education. And then sort of the opposite end of the spectrum, we'll also advocate, for against what's popular for every developer to claim that every project they ever do is smart. And, it's popular for all sorts of neighbors to claim that every project is dumb. And to the extent that we can, we try to arbitrate between that and say, these are the principles of what smart growth is. And these are projects that fit this, and, these are projects that don't.
So before the pandemic hit, you all had planned to do Places 2040 Summit, and you were one of the co-sponsors and co-runners of that. So, and I think, Carol, you were pretty involved in that process. Is that right?
I am. I'm actually the co-chair of the Summit Steering Committee. And we've had a real evolution. 2 years ago, we, as the coalition, partnered with LHOP, Lancaster Housing Opportunity Partnership, to put on a summit. And the point of the summit was, or the objective of the summit, was to really help Lancaster County Planning Commission roll out, educate, implement, get adopted, et cetera, the new Places 2040 comprehensive plan, county comprehensive plan. And of course, we are very supportive of all the, of everything in the plan. So that's why we decided to do this summit. And we spent a year planning it, and it was supposed to have been April a year ago. And of course, we all know what happened. And we thought, well, it's only going to be a couple of weeks shut down, and maybe we'll still have it at the end of April. And that didn't happen. And then we thought, well, we'll put it back till the fall of 2020. Well, that didn't happen. So we are now back into the summit business, but we're looking at it a lot differently. In the 2 years since we started, the maturation of the Places 2040 plan has occurred. I think many people have heard about it. All the municipalities have been educated. A lot of them have already adopted it. The Lancaster County Planning Commission has done a great job of having meetings and get-togethers and education sessions and so on and so forth. So we've been looking at each other saying, we should stick with the idea of doing this summit, but look at what's changed. In the past 2 years, the way people live has changed. The way people are with so many people working from home, and there seems to be a general consensus that some amount of that will continue. People look at how the pandemic spread, and they're looking for different kinds of living options. And, all of this stuff affects transportation and education and everything going on in the county. So we think now we're going to have a great summit post-pandemic. very supportive of the 5 big ideas and the Places 2040 plan, but nevertheless with a little different perspective and objective. So we're very excited.
Yeah,
And
can't
right
wait.
now it's scheduled for just about a year from now, next
Okay.
March of 2022.
Can't wait to
So
see what it looks like.
I will have been working on it for 3 years.
And Josh, kind of going off with what Carol talked about here, how does the work of the coalition support and align with Places 2040 in general, outside of this summit? How does your work align? Are you always simpatico on some of the work that's in that comprehensive plan, or are there sometimes differences?
No, I mean, a plan that covers 20 years of land growth in a county as large and diverse as Lancaster, I think it's impossible to get it perfect. And in a lot of cases, perfect is the enemy of good. I think the county did an exceptional job. I think they solicited feedback from residents and various stakeholders, and they put together, guiding principles. When you're covering that much ground and that long a time frame, it's tough to put a specific, this is exactly what it'll look like. So instead, they took a step back and said, these are the principles that we want to guide decisions in our community. And to that, we're fully supportive. And, we think it's a good plan. And, I think the community would be better to the extent that we follow the 5 big ideas outlined in the plan than, if we don't.
Excellent. And so, looking out 20 years, even if we look out 10 years, what does growth look like here in Lancaster County? How do you grow and be smart about it instead of dumb growth, right? How do you have smart growth? What does that look like here?
Yeah, I think one of the ways I would describe that is illustrated some of the mistakes of the past. Development tended to be structured in, one area, and got less dense outside of that. And in the last, 50 years, most development has been centered around the automobile. And we have separated our uses of property and our types of property. And the ramifications of that are, traffic, health, all of these other things. And as we look for the next 20 years, hopefully we design more holistic communities that aren't as segregated by use and not as segregated by purpose or elsewhere. A lot of the development that we've had has been structured on single family detached homes. And looking forward, family sizes are expected to decrease over the next 20 years. There will be more and more single folks living alone, either, younger folks that are not married or, older people, the baby boomers, as they downsize. And the housing stock that we have doesn't reflect that. So a big challenge that we will have is how do we update and advance these developments that we've built to reflect the actual users and tenants of them. And I think it's beneficial as well to consider diversity. We've segregated based on use, where retail goes in one section, industrial in another, and residential somewhere else. And when you build for scale, when you build 50, 100 units at the same time, it's just more efficient to build those units to be exactly the same. And I can understand why it's easier for municipalities to plan and approve units that are exactly the same and home builders to do that. But then when you have a community that is buying the exact same size, age, and type of housing, that community itself tends to be very homogeneous. You have buyers that are buying properties that are at the same stage of their life, at a similar income and a similar education. And that sort of stratification or segregation, I think hurt the sense of community that we've had in a lot of ways. One of the interesting stats that I ran across is that districts that voted for president in a landslide, where nationally there really hasn't been a landslide where a president has won by more than 10 points. But the number of districts where a president has been elected by more than 10 points in that district has increased steadily since the 70s. And it's a reflection of how segregated we've been based on within our communities. And so the idea that it's more efficient to build housing of one type in one location makes sense from a production standpoint, but the effects of that include racial, education, income, net worth, and even political affiliation. And I would love to see us have a more conversation about what returning to actual diverse, holistic, complete community looks like.
So part of what you mentioned there is a racial piece. What role does smart growth and land use planning play in increasing equity in communities?
Yeah, so a lot of the developments I had mentioned were built at a time when redlining was regularly practiced.
Can you explain a little bit what is redlining?
Sure. Redlining was specifically used by banks, and they were used, the story was to protect banks and home buyers and protect their investment. And the idea was that communities that were racially diverse did not appreciate and value as much. And so people of color were prohibited from buying or getting financing in certain neighborhoods. The term today means more than just financing. There were practices of, realtors not showing homes in certain neighborhoods. There were deed restrictions in certain communities where people of color were just legally not allowed to buy property. Today, so many of these communities were built on very intentional racial segregation. So many of the zoning and planning ordinances that are in place now are designed to preserve neighborhoods the way they are, and including that sort of preservation of use or purpose is a preservation of that historical legacy of racial segregation. So a lot of times there's a disconnect there where it's not necessarily obvious that having minimum road widths is intended to further racial segregation, but it is meant to preserve communities the way they were designed. And a lot of those communities were designed with racial segregation at the heart of them.
And shifting gears here a little bit to kind of looking in the future as well here. Carol has been a long suffering board member of Hourglass in our Zoom meetings is how not suffering on Hourglass board. I'm sure Carol has very much enjoyed her time there, but the Zoom meetings we have every week is now a fact of life for a lot of folks. Hourglass did an article looking at the Zoom having remote folks working from different areas of the country, but living here in Lancaster, and the potential for that going forward of Lancaster being kind of a hub for remote work. There's an article that came out in Ownerly that looked at a lot of different factors that go into that, and South Central and Southeastern Pennsylvania are like top of the list in the country of places where people could work remotely but live in those communities. So Carol, do you see some of those trends happening? I know in healthcare, I think a lot of that's happening, and that was your previous industry, but what does that look like going forward?
Well, what you say is 100% true. I happen to read the New York Times, and if you want to buy an apartment in Manhattan, now is the time, because people are leaving in droves and they're coming to cities like Lancaster. They want, smaller town communities, that feeling of belonging. And there was an interesting article that people are now willing to accept what we would consider very long commute times because they only have to actually be in their office maybe one day a week. So they're more than willing to move from New York to, say, Lancaster, and only have to make that 3-hour drive once a week, and in order to reap all the benefits of living in a community like ours. So, I see huge, shifting of how people are going to work and live. And again, to get back to the summit, that is something that we hope to be able to capture in our sessions that we're going to do during that summit. And I also wanted to make one other point. You had said something about smart growth versus dumb growth. For people that want to look it up, smart growth is an actual thing. There are 10 principles of smart growth. And it's not just a subjective evaluation that, oh, that's smart and that's not smart. There are 10 principles, and that has to do with kinds of housing, transportation, walkability, and all of those things that really make a community. But those 10 things are the principles of smart growth.
Excellent. And Josh, when we look at, maybe separating, geographically separating work from home, what does that look like? What does that look like from a comprehensive planning standpoint long term? If that is a geographic separation and you don't have to think about, you could work 4 hours away, right, from where you are. Does that change how we think about neighborhoods?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think in a lot of ways, it will sort of revisit what it means to actually be in a neighborhood. I think if you're looking for some sort of urban living on the East Coast and you want to be able to walk and play and work all within some community, Lancaster City is probably the cheapest on the entire East Coast. And so if you're not tied to a specific geography for, your work, I think we look a lot more attractive. And suddenly the decision is, what value am I getting for $1 million in Brooklyn that I couldn't get for, 200,000 in Lancaster?
Right.
And when you take away the 40 hours plus commute time in an office, all of the other things end up being more important. What parks are nearby, what restaurants are nearby, what outdoor coffee shops are nearby, so I don't have to be inside. And I think the last year has taught us, healthcare is very important as well. And being able to access those services easily and safely, are also a factor. As a certain segment of the population converted to work from home, some of them won't ever go back. And so the demand for residential space over office space has now increased. And I believe it's probably a structural permanent change. And we've seen that in the demand for homes in the last several months. Inventory is incredibly low. And where those homes are located will also be of great importance. And I think that has accelerated some of the changes we've seen nationally over the last couple of decades. And I don't think it's fundamentally changed too much for Lancaster County. Maybe it's changed how attractive it is to live in the financial district in Manhattan. I don't know. I'm not an expert at that. I'm speculating. But it certainly accelerated a lot of the trends that we've seen.
Excellent. Well, excited to see what this has in store for us. So thanks both Josh and Carol for being with us today. Just learned a lot and appreciate the work of the Coalition for Smart Growth. So thanks for being with us.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for all you do for the community.
Thank you, sir. All right. Well, thanks very much. And we'll see you later.
Yeah.